goodness, something terrible? What? Have Fran Kelly's ABC bosses decided that her breakfast show should run even longer every morning? Welcome to Media Watch. I'm Jonathan Holmes. And we know you love those little stuff-ups, so here are a couple more. Look at the name super on this Late Line interview.
For myself, surfing has been, tremendous and endless lessons.
His name is Jerry Lopez, and what he does is surf. On 10 News last Monday, Hugh Riminton demonstrated why he is not a political numbers man.
Julia Gillard has won the ballot, 71 votes to 31.
The ballot box might as well have been a coffin. The result was so emphatic, if Kevin Rudd had doubled his vote, he still would have lost.
Here are the maths, Hugh. There were 102 votes cast. So if Kevin Rudd had doubled his vote to 62, that would have left just 40 for Julia Gillard. Mr. Rudd would have been a handsome winner. Another bloke who got his numbers wrong on Monday morning was the Sydney Morning Herald's Philip Currie, who tweeted,
Gillard wins, 73 to 29.
Yay, he was first with the result. Unfortunately, minutes later,
Gillard wins, 71 to 31, confirmed. Sorry, got it wrong.
But Monday's little snafus were completely overshadowed by the events of Friday morning, when almost the entire Canberra Press Gallery, including some of its giants, were made to look really, really silly. There they were, all pontificating in the morning papers about another Gillard stuff-up.
Michelle Grattan. The aborted attempt to get Bob Carr into Parliament turned an opportunity into an own goal.
Simon Benson. How she could botch this beggars belief.
Dennis Shanahan. Julia Gillard's ability to turn good news into bad news and dumb politics appears to be boundless.
And the gallery was equally sure about what the Prime Minister was about to do.
I'm told Stephen Smith, who lost Foreign Affairs to Kevin Rudd when he was dumped as Prime Minister, is likely to get his old job back when the reshuffle's announced tomorrow.
Julia Gillard is tipped to move Stephen Smith from the defence portfolio back to the vacant Foreign Affairs job.
Oh, how they all had to eat their words.
First, Bob Carr will join the Senate and will take on the role of Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Huge up yours from the PM.
Surprise!
What a hoot!
Online, they were soon telling us how they'd been right all along. Michelle Grattan.
On Monday she wooed him. On Tuesday she rejected him. By Thursday it was all on again.
And Philip Currie.
Until Gillard salvaged the situation, the prospect of Bob Carr becoming Foreign Affairs Minister was dead.
Among many, many others. It's easy to mock the journos, but it seems likely that last week in Canberra was a classic demonstration of what physicists call the observer effect. As that fountainhead of knowledge Wikipedia puts it,
this is often the result of instruments that, by necessity, alter the state of what they measure in some manner.
In this case, the instrument was the media, and it fundamentally altered the turn of events. The first observation was made by none other than Philip Currie on Tuesday morning, when variations on this story were posted on Fairfax media websites.
The former New South Wales Premier, Bob Carr, has been approached to take Mark Arbib's spot in the Senate and could be offered the Foreign Affairs portfolio. Senior sources say Mr Carr has been approached by the New South Wales right.
Currie was first, and this time he was right. At lunchtime, he updated the story.
It is understood the push to enlist Mr Carr was killed off after its exposure by Fairfax media this morning.
In fact, as Currie admitted next morning, the killing off was underway before he got his first leak. In fact, the leak was a sign that the killers were on the move.
Federal Labor sources said there was some internal resistance in Canberra to Mr Carr taking a portfolio, and they believe that was why the story was leaked.
So Philip Currie's report probably didn't change anything. It was Dennis Shanahan and Matthew Franklin at The Australian who did. Because what the Sydney Morning Herald buried in the middle of its reshuffle story on Wednesday morning's front page, the Oz made into the page one lead.
Mutiny kills PM's Bob Carr plan.
Well, mutiny may have been too strong a word, and certainly this paragraph would turn out to be wrong.
Ms Gillard offered the job to Mr Carr last week when Mr Rudd resigned to contest the leadership ballot, and before Senator Arbib announced his resignation from the Ministry and Senate.
In fact, everyone else now agrees that the first approach to Bob Carr wasn't made until Monday, after Arbib announced his resignation. Not that the Australian has admitted any error, let alone corrected it. Perhaps it was that mistake and the use of the emotive word mutiny which prompted the Prime Minister to say this.
The story that's on the front page of the Australian newspaper today is completely untrue.
Were you overruled, though?
I've just said completely untrue.
No.
I've just said completely untrue.
Well, of course it wasn't completely untrue. She had been in discussions with Carr, and they had been discontinued because of objections from some of her colleagues. The observers on the opposition benches and in the press gallery were soon baying for blood.
Within 24 hours, the faceless men are rampant, running her government to the extent that she can't even choose her own foreign minister.
Outright denial of foreign offer is another failed test. Dennis Shanahan.
Gillard red-faced over Carr bungle. Philip Coorey.
By then, the whole press pack had joined in the hunt, and it's now assumed Julia Gillard realised that she simply couldn't afford to be seen buckling under to the factional leaders. As the Insider's Barry Cassidy put it,
she probably thought, stuff it. I think appointing Bob Carr is the best course for the government and the country. I'm the boss and I'm going to do this.
And this time, nobody leaked. So it seems some of the credit for getting Bob Carr to Canberra should probably go to Dennis Shanahan and Matthew Franklin for altering the state of what they observed, the state, that is, of the Prime Minister's backbone, by observing it. Credit too to Andrew Probyn of the West Australian for the pithiest summary of the week's events.
Prime Minister, having committed perhaps a reverse wedgie on the press gallery, can we...
Thank you for the elevated tone.
No worries.
A reverse wedgie indeed. And now to the bloke who committed a wedgie on the media as a whole on Friday, the redoubtable Ray Finkelstein, QC.
Labor plan to control the media.
Fears of media showdown if new watchdog wins approval.
Media fears for freedom as watchdog unleashed.
Challenge to a free media.
Mr Finkelstein's proposal of a taxpayer-funded news media council to police standards and adjudicate complaints was bound to provoke outrage in the big newspaper companies. Yet it's hard to argue with this.
A free press should be publicly accountable for its performance.
Or with the conclusion that the body that newspapers have set up to handle complaints against them, the Australian Press Council,
does not have the necessary powers or the required funds to carry out its designated functions. Publishers can withdraw when they wish and alter their funding as they see fit.
It's undeniable, too, that the processes of the regulator for TV and radio, the Australian Communications and Media Authority,
are cumbersome and slow.
You can't fix those problems, declares Mr Finkelstein. You need a new body to handle media complaints, funded but not controlled by the government. The howls from the print media have been matched by snorts of derision from the online world. Mr Finkelstein proposes that newsletter publishers and bloggers should also be regulated. If, he writes,
a news internet site has a minimum of 15,000 hits per annum, it should be subject to the jurisdiction of the News Media Council, but not otherwise.
Presumably the report meant 15,000 page views, and that's an absurdly low number. Kangaroo Court of Australia is one of the country's more outspoken political blogs. This programme has been one of its many targets. Its author, Shane Dowling, told us,
it's going to encapsulate tens of thousands of bloggers. I did over 100,000 page views last year, and this week alone I've already done my 20,000.
He reckons the anarchic blogosphere won't take kindly to compulsory regulation.
If they bring in a news media council and try to go after us, there would be an online Armageddon like you've never seen before.
That 15,000 figure isn't the only puzzling detail in a long report which has been written very quickly. For example, Mr Finkelstein recommends that the News Media Council should abide by
a strict timetable for handling complaints. For example, there could be a requirement that the media outlet concerned has 2 days to respond to a complaint, and the panel then has a further 2 days to resolve the complaint and make a decision.
Well, that would be great for complainants, but it's frankly fanciful to imagine that a statutory body with powers of compulsion could or should work as fast as that, especially one imposed on a recalcitrant media. And Ray Finkelstein recommends that the new council should have the power to order corrections, apologies and rights of reply.
In a newspaper, the reply would need a degree of prominence commensurate with the prominence of the original report.
So, supposing the News Media Council found that that headline in The Australian,
"Mutiny kills PM's Bob Carr plan,"
was inaccurate or unfair, 4 days later, would the Oz look like this?
Sorry, Julia, mutiny was over the top.
In your dreams. Labour's dreams, anyway. I'm sure a lot of you would love to see a media regulator with teeth. For what it's worth, I think the cure might prove worse than the disease. But much more important voices than mine are stacked against Mr. Finkelstein, and he knows it. In his report, he quotes the ABC's Director of Editorial Policies, Paul Chadwick, who wrote back in 1996, long before he joined the ABC,
"Media concentration has reached the point where no legislature would have the courage to enact a statutory scheme of journalism ethics and then to enforce it against the largest media outlets."
And Mr. Finkelstein adds,
It is difficult to disagree with his assessment.
My bet is this: the News Media Council won't happen. But the threat of it will push the big media proprietors to beef up the Australian Press Council. And eventually that body, perhaps with partial government funding, will expand its remit to all media. Which is precisely what the Press Council's chairman, Julian Disney, has wanted all along. Now he sees his chance.
The challenge now is clearly there for the publishers. Do they want to avoid what they would see as bad elements in what he's proposed? If so, they've got to greatly strengthen us.
The shame is that during the hearings he held in Western Australia, Mr. Finkelstein came up with a better idea. Mr. Brett Christian, proprietor of the Post Group of suburban papers, told him that most journalists
are more afraid of Media Watch than the Press Council.
What about then, instead of putting money into a press council, I suggest to the government they should fund Media Watch 15 minutes every day instead of every Monday.
Great idea. Yes.
Now, Mr. Finkelstein, whatever happened to that great idea? And by the way, it's 13 minutes and we've used them up. Until tomorrow. What? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I mean, until next Monday. Good night.